the affirmation for this is, the divine creative power within me brings to me all that I want with happiness, love, and peace. The key word here is attract. Attract to yourself that which you desire. What you desire desires you, or what you want wants you. And it's really coming to understand that there is an energy that will bring things to you, that will have things begin to show up. And this is not to say that you just put out your manifestation desire and then just sit around and wait for some huge magnet in the sky to just turn on and be facing towards you and have everything just go, there it is. There's an element of working with this divine universal force that is everywhere, and a part of this divine essence. It is a divine creation. As you become more tuned into this divine consciousness, you begin to see that there's really a spiritual solution to every problem in your life. That the things that don't seem to be working, the problems that you may have, whatever they are, in relationships, in finances, in healing, and so on, that there is a solution in the physical plane that requires you to get up and do certain kinds of things and act in certain ways. But in back of that action is a thought. And the same force, or the same power that moves waves to particles, which is the act of creation, also moves your pictures or your thoughts into the world of form. The same intelligence, the same energy that moves a star across the sky moves a thought across your mind. This energy, this attractiveness, this attraction, this pull towards you and realignment of your intention with divine purpose is something that we can't measure in the physical world the way we would like to be able to measure it, the way we can measure ohms and watts and so on when we're talking about electricity. Nevertheless, it is exactly the very same power, and the power that allows for anything to go from wave to particle also is behind your ability to think, and therefore your ability to picture, and your ability to decide what it is that you do desire. There is something inside of you that allows you to desire something. It isn't the desire I'm talking about. I'm talking about that which gives birth to it, that which allows it to be. The analogy here is when you begin to take care of your body in a certain way and to treat it well, to give it plenty of water, to avoid toxins, to give it the rest that it needs, to nourish it with the proper vitamins and minerals, to give it the proper amount of exercise, to do the things that show that you are respectful of this garage that is housing your soul. It becomes automatic. It isn't any longer something that you have to struggle with, that you have to work on, and that you have to think about all the time. You go to automatic. It's a lot like writing also, and creating, and painting, and music. You know, when Picasso was interviewed about his painting, and they asked him, how do you paint? He said, when I go into the studio, I leave my body and my mind at the door, the way the Muslims leave their shoes before they enter the mosque. And I just allow my spirit into that world. The spirit, this soul, this force that I have talked so much about in this whole entire program, is really a power of love that you feel in your heart. It isn't something that you process with your mind. But when you understand it and know that it is an energy that is working, that brings things into the world, into your world, realigns you, if you will, with what it is you'd like to create or have for yourself, you begin to cooperate. See, this divine intelligence will cooperate with you. But again, only if you feel that you're worthy, and only if you know that you and it are connected. The minute you sense any sense of separation, it shuts off. The minute you place an obstacle there, it will shut off.
We think that if we don't accomplish something, that we're not valuable. We don't stop and say that who I am is valuable because I exist. And that's all I need to know that I'm worthy. That my worth doesn't come from how well I do, but we send our kids off to school and we teach them, don't we? I'd never ask my kids for their report card. It's just never been a big deal to me whatsoever. And I've often told the story so many times of when I was living in the orphanage in Mount Clemens, and I came home from school, and I asked Mrs. Scarf, the lady that we lived with, what's a scurvy elephant? And she said, where did you hear that? I said, well, I heard Mrs. Poole, my third grade teacher, telling the principal that Wayne Dyer was in her classroom and that he was a scurvy elephant. And so she said, no, I've never heard of that. She got on the telephone and called the principal. The principal said, oh, that's Wayne. He gets everything mixed up. She didn't say that he was a scurvy elephant in her classroom. She said that he was a disturbing element in her classroom. And my great teacher, one of the great teachers of my life, Abraham Maslow, used to say that if you really want to reach self-actualization, you have to learn, first and foremost, to become independent of the good opinion of other people. To become independent of it, and not run your life on the basis of what other people have told you that you should be doing. E. E. Cummings, the great American poet with all lowercase letters, remember? To be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you just like everybody else means to fight the greatest battle there is to fight and never stop fighting. I don't use the word fighting, but I suggest to you that, and I wrote this out in here, ego training continues into adulthood, often eradicating any self-concept based on our divinity as a piece of God who came from non-doing and is headed back to non-doing. Ego training contributes to a self-concept that makes us shrivel into a feeling of insignificance at our meager portfolio in contrast to those who've achieved more. The truth is, we don't have to do a thing in order to validate ourselves as worthy and valuable. Had we done nothing but just be godlike, we'd fulfill our own dharma. Ironically, we'd most likely have created a larger and even more impressive resume. Had you allowed yourself to just be. You are not a human doing, you are a human being. And being means not identifying yourself on the basis of what you do or what you accomplish. The great irony of what I'm speaking about here is that when you get to this place that I'm speaking about, this place of non-doing, which most of our egos can hardly even comprehend because we've been so saturated with the belief system that if you don't do and accomplish and accumulate, then you're not valuable. So it's hard for us to imagine, how do you do without struggling, without striving, without working so hard? But just ask any great artist how they do it. You know, Picasso said that when I enter my studio to paint, he said, I leave my body at the door before I enter, the way the Muslims leave their shoes when they enter the mosque. And I just allow my spirit to be there. This talk that I'm giving to you right now is a non-doing talk. I don't know what I'm going to be saying 5 minutes from now or 3 hours from now, any more than the ball that you throw in the air has any idea of where it's headed. It just is. And that place is not a place of irresponsibility and not being respectable. Ironically, it's a place of great accomplishment. My most joyous moments in writing are when I'm not struggling, when I'm not trying, when I've let go. In the recovery movement, every one of you know what we say, don't you? Let go and what? Let God. Just allow the highest part of you to take over and become at peace with that. So it's like, have I lost ambition? No, I haven't lost ambition. I've lost attachment to the ego identification of what ambition is. I've lost that completely. So you don't get lazy. In fact, you get more active. You get busier, then your resume gets bigger. You know, your list of accomplishments grows and grows and grows, but you're not attached to it any longer. You just, there's no hanging on to it. There's no need for it. It's not. So you're living in process rather than outcome. You know, outcome is when you're doing what you're doing so that you'll get the accolades or the money or the rewards of some kind or the Emmy or whatever it is. You know, you get that. Whereas, you know, the great actors, they're not thinking about getting an Academy Award while they're doing the acting any more than Michael Jordan is thinking about, you know, getting above the rim when he's out there playing. You know, he's just in the moment, and perfected the business of being in the moment, and not attached to any of the stuff. And then when you ask him how he does what he does, he says, I haven't got an idea. I have no idea. Which is, when people ask me, how do I get in front of an audience and speak to an audience and keep them entertained and live, I don't know how to teach that. I can't teach that, you know, any more than you can teach filmmaking. So a lot of people want to know about making the complete shift into meaning. A lot of it is about attachment and detaching yourself from the things that you used to think you absolutely had to have, and that the more you detach yourself, there's an old story told of two kittens, or a kitten and an old cat in the alley. Have you heard that story? And the kitten is in the alley, and he's chasing his tail, like you see kittens do, chasing and chasing and chasing and chasing. And the old cat looks at him and says, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm chasing after my tail. He said, well, why would you do that? He said, well, I just returned from cat philosophy school, and in cat philosophy school, we learned that there are two things that are important for a cat. One is that happiness is the most important thing for a cat. And two, that happiness is located in my tail. So what I've discovered and decided to do is that I'm going to chase after it. And once I get a hold of it and get a grip on it, I'll have a lock on eternal happiness. And the old alley cat looks at him and says, you know, I really haven't had a chance to go to philosophy school like you did. I've lived in the alleys most of my life. He said, but it's amazing. I've discovered those same truths for me, that happiness is the most important thing in the world for a cat. And I've noticed that it is located in my tail. He said, the only difference, I think, between you and I is that I've noticed that when I do go about my business and do the things that are really important to me, it follows after me wherever I go. It chases after you wherever you go. And that's really a very hard message for those of us who grew up in the ego-dominated, I have to get more, I have to get ahead of other people, I evaluate myself on the basis of my achievements and so on, to believe that something could chase after you, you know. And so the issue becomes, and I think this is a really significant part of this, of moving into meaning in your life, is when is it most likely that one of these quantum shifts is going to take place? When are you going to get this otherworldly message, or when are you going to get the wake-up call, the internal wake-up call, however it manifests? How's that going to show up? These quantum shifts can take, you know, like many different forms. I've asked people in audiences to come forward and give me examples of quantum moments, you know, in your life. And they range. I mean, they range from, I just had an insight, you know. It happened to me in a dream. I awoke from a dream, and it was just so real and so clear that this was it was a synchronistic event. I mean, I was thinking about this, and all of it, and somebody came on television, and they started talking about it, and I exactly knew. Another one, I get it on my radio show all the time. They'll hear me talking to somebody on my radio show about this, and just listening to another person, hearing another person's story and all of it, it triggers that kind of a thing. But generally the transition is preceded by an awareness that I think everyone has. if you're really skillful at asking people about themselves, you can get it out of them that they know. They know that there's more to their life. They know that there is. I bet if I ask you about filmmaking and so on, you could probably go to something inside of you that maybe you were doing something else, delivering newspapers. Who knows what the hell you were doing? And all of a sudden, it's like it began to hit. Maybe a film that you saw, maybe something, whatever, and that's it. You're hooked, and you're moving in that direction, and meaning now becomes like the dynamic or drawing force in your life. So your ambition now becomes to fulfill your dharma, to fulfill your destiny. Quantum moments show up in different ways for virtually everyone, but what they usually signify, especially what I just described, that very vivid, surprising, kindly, benevolent, long-lasting kind of thing that takes place, is where a person is getting themselves, in the Tao they would call it, returning back to the Tao, returning to the place from which you came while you're here, living heaven on earth within yourself. In fact, Leo Tolstoy wrote a book called "The Kingdom of Heaven is Within," about that, just that concept, about having it within you. And I don't know if it's so much a letting go as it is a reconnection to what I call the field of intention, or the power of intention. I mean, intention, the book, The Power of Intention, is really not about the ego saying, I intend to make something happen, and that's therefore I'm going to do it. It has nothing to do with that. It's the opposite of that. The field of intention is really a field from which all things are intended. And all you have to do is reconnect yourself to that field, that creative field that intends everything into the world of the 10,000 things, into the world of the material world, and get yourself in harmony with that. And that's what I think happens in the meaning phase of our life, is that we reconnect to our source of being. Castaneda spoke about that there's a link between you and this field of intention, but for almost everybody, it's a rusty link. It's just it's not clean. It's just every once in a while we realize, oh my God, there is something bigger. There is something happening here. Oh wow, look at that. Oh, I met that person and that, and the right thing showed up, and I have a synchronistic. Carl Jung invented that term, synchronicity. I have like just sort of a collaboration with fate. It feels like, as if just everything just is working right, and the right people are showing up, and all of that. That stuff begins to really foment in your life, and you begin to see it taking place all over when you let go of the ego. Because the ego, according to most of the spiritual teachers, including Patanjali, is just called, it's the false self. This idea that you are what you have and what you do and what other people think of you, and that you're separate from everybody else and separate from God, that's just false. It's like, so you're living under, and that's why the Jung quote where he says that what was true in the morning will have at evening have become a lie, and you're literally living a lie, trying to fulfill a destiny that has been imposed upon you by all of these, by society and by the right people and so on. But in here, there's music that you came here to play, and you came here to play that music. Intention, the field of intention, is asking you to play that music, and to take the risks, and to do whatever it is that is required of you. And I'll be there to guide you and make it easy for you. It's not going to be a struggle. It's not going to be that difficult. You've just convinced yourself that this is going to, that's what my next book is about looking at the thought systems that we have that keep us from changing long habituated thinking patterns. Why is a person overweight almost all of their life? It isn't because they were destined to be fat. They're thinking, in a different way. And the same with addictions. Or why do you keep attracting the same kind of people into your life? The wrong people for you, or whatever it might be. This is just all long habituated thought systems that if we challenge them and begin to see that they're not even true. They're all lies. So it's like we live in a world in which all things are possible, in which There's no accidents. There can be no accidents. There's an organizing intelligence that supports everything in this universe, and we live as if who we are is this little microscopic separate thing who's always got to do things a certain way and fit in a certain way, and none of that is true.
And begin to awaken to a new level, to a whole new level of experience. You'll see it this way. The first thing you'll notice is a tendency to think and act spontaneously, rather than on fears based on your past experiences. In other words, you begin to trust and surrender and to have a sense of spontaneity about your life. And you're not always focused on whether it's going to work out or not going to work out, and be afraid if it doesn't. And those thoughts are you're no longer wanting those thoughts to expand in your life. And then you'll notice an unmistakable ability to enjoy each moment of your life. Every moment becomes an exquisite part of your existence. And you'll find yourself, even in times when you used to think of them as boring or routine, like, maybe getting at an airport and being delayed for a couple of hours, you begin to find an unmistakable ability to enjoy that, and to not judge it, and to see it for what it is, and to even be grateful for it, that you're not getting on a plane that wasn't supposed to leave at that time. You begin to see it that way. And you begin to enjoy the little things that we so take for granted, and the quiet times, and even driving back and forth to work, or you find yourself having this unmistakable new ability to enjoy every moment that you find in your life and to treat it all as a gift. It's a sign of the awakened life. You also find that you're developing a loss of interest in judging other people. You're off of judgment. You're moving beyond that. You understand the truth and the notion that you don't define other people with your judgments. You define yourself as someone who needs to judge. That each one of us is defined by our own thoughts and our own actions. And even those people who are behaving in ways that are antisocial and that are criminal and so on, you find yourself less judging them and more seeing them for what they are. Not saying that they shouldn't be held accountable and responsible, of course. But that judgment, that inner hostility, that inner anger toward them is replaced by a sense of wondering, how could that little baby at one time who was in its mother's arms turn out this way? What created that? And I wonder if there's anything I can do to help eliminate that in other children, rather than the judgment. You find a loss of interest in interpreting the actions of other people. You don't become this great interpreter for what everybody is and what everybody is doing. The awakened life beckons you to just sort of observe it, to note it. And even in your own behavior, you become less inclined to interpret it and more inclined to say that this is just an indication of where I am or where I am not at this particular moment. And with no need to analyze it, you begin to see how everything fits together. Rather than analyzing every little bit of life and interpreting everything for people, you try to do less of that and more of seeing how we all fit together. The awakened life means a loss of confrontation. You're no longer interested in it. It just isn't important to you. It's like having to prove yourself and make a contest out of everything. It's just no longer there for you. The real sense of the awakened life behind that is that you don't have to make anybody else wrong. And you don't have to make yourself right. That's the real sense of awakening, when you begin to know that there's much more to life than making a contest out of it. I noticed that when my little boy, who's 2 years old, goes out to play, any place, the only reason that he does it is for fun. I mean, he doesn't try to win, he doesn't try to beat anybody, he doesn't try to confront anybody. He just goes out to play. And we lose that in the name of confrontation and conflict. You begin to develop that sense that inside every one of us is a little 2-year-old who wants to come out and play and doesn't have to win and doesn't have to beat anybody and doesn't have to be in conflict or confrontation. That little child inside of you begins to surface when you start awakening. You lose the ability to worry. I didn't say you lose worry, you lose the ability to worry. It's no longer part of you. You begin to understand the absurdity of worry. You begin to see that it makes no sense to worry about the things that you have no control over. Because if you have no control over them, it makes no sense to worry about them. And then it makes no sense to worry about the things that you do have control over. Because if you got control over them, it makes no sense to worry about them. And there goes everything that you ever worried about. You either have control or you don't. And if you don't, you move on. And if you do, you take control. As you awaken, you lose that ability to just worry about things and instead accept them. You'll notice frequent, overwhelming episodes of appreciation, as she puts it. Frequent, overwhelming episodes of appreciation. Appreciating everything, being thankful. It's one of the great ways to become awakened in your life, is to be thankful for everything and to give thanks for it. Appreciate getting on a plane and having it take off and having it land and having a seat and having someone to serve you a drink and being able to wear clothes and everything about your life. And as you become more aware of how much you have and how much you have to be grateful for, you become less focused on scarcity and what you don't have, because your mind is focused on what you do have. And when your mind is focused on what you do have expands. You begin to develop contented feelings of connectedness with others and with nature. You begin to see that every human being that you meet any place on the planet shares being human with you and what it feels like to be human. You begin to see that there's a oneness to it all, that there's a universal mind, that you're a part of it. And you know that each one of us is connected and that on a round planet we can't choose up sides. That you begin to know that, then you treat the people that you come into contact with the same sense of reverence that you have for yourself, because you are, in fact, that person. It's why Jesus said on the cross when the spear was thrown into him, "Forgive him, Father, for he knows not what he does." The reason he knows not what he does, he doesn't know that he's throwing a spear into himself. Because every time you hurt another human being, you hurt the generic human being. You hurt all of us. And every time you send out love, you create a sense of harmony in that being. You begin to have what she called frequent attacks of smiling. You become more joyous, more merry, more contented as you awaken and get beyond all of this need to accumulate and perform and achieve, which is all wonderful. But when you go beyond it, you begin to develop an increased susceptibility to the love extended by others, as well as the uncontrollable urge to extend it to others. Love becomes what you are, and you can't give away what you don't have, and you can only give away what you do have. And if what you have is love, then that's what you find yourself giving away. Those are the symptoms, the signs of awakening.
To change the idea that I can't trust in my own nature to I trust in my own nature. Did it ever occur to you that you have a nature? That nature is so profound and is always calling you. You know it. No one else can know it. No one else can impose it on you. No one else can tell you what it is that you feel in here, that you know is why you're here and what you're doing here. There's no one else can explain that or explore that with you. You can't share it. Everything in the universe has a nature. Your dog has a nature. A crocodile has a nature. A duck has a nature. A crow has a nature. Everything has its nature. Everything has a dharma, including you. But what we've learned and we've grown up to believe is that I can't trust in that nature. My nature, to trust in your nature, to know that you came from a divine place of well-being and to trust in it. Listen to this, verse 38 of the Tao, a few lines. The great master follows his own nature and not the trappings of life. A truly good man is not aware of his goodness and is therefore good. Think about yourself. The first moment of life, the very first moment, that speck when you went from nowhere, N-O-W-H-E-R-E, to now here, N-O-W-H-E-R-E, from nowhere to now here. Same thing, just a little question of spacing, just a little different spacing, all right? So you went from nowhere, now you're in now here, and where do you think you're going? Nowhere. Right? Back to nowhere. Who out there watching, who in this audience isn't going back to nowhere? That's where we're all headed, back to nowhere. So in that split second, then you lived inside your mother's womb for 9 months. And in that 9-month period of time, you trusted your nature. You didn't have a sonogram and say, oh my God, I don't have a nose. This is very scary. What if it doesn't show up on time? Or you didn't do any of that. You trusted completely in your own nature, right? And so did your mother. There's very little that you can do, because what you were to become, everything that this physical body needed, was all handled in there. And also, beyond what was needed for your physical world, and what Lao Tzu called the world of the 10,000 things. The 10,000 things. There's 10 zillion things, obviously, in the physical world, but that's how he named it, the world of the 10,000 things. And in that world of the 10,000 things, everything returns back to its source. But while you're in that place, and why wouldn't you believe, even maybe for a second, that not only was my physiology all handled for me, but everything else that I needed, if I could just stop interfering with it and stop other people from doing it, that everything I needed. And that's a big part of understanding change your thoughts, change your life. It's a big part of that. The idea that I have a nature that I can trust, not something that I have to be afraid of, and I can stop letting other people interfere with it as well. So what happens? We go through those 9 months, totally uninterrupted. We have no questions. Everything works out. And then what? We say the very first thing, we pop out after 9 months, we'll take over from here. That was good work. Nice work, God. Thank you very much. And so what we'll do is just sort of edge you out of here, you know. So we edge God out. We take on an ego. E-G-O. And we edge out and we say, we'll take over. And we have an ego, and this ego, what this ego does is it takes on a set of beliefs. And these beliefs are that I am what I have, that I am what I do, that I am what other people think of me. So we're raised to believe that the more stuff I accumulate, the more things that I get, this is who I am. The more that people like me, this is what I'll get, and on it goes. I want to tell you a story. It's a story of one of my children. Her name is Tracy. When she showed up, after about the second or third year, Tracy went to preschool. And she came home from preschool. She was about 3. And in that time she came home and she said, she handed me a paper, and it had a gold star at the top of the paper. And I looked at it and I said, and she said, Daddy, I got a gold star, I said, I'm not really interested in gold stars. I said, but what are you doing? What is this? What? She said, well, we did something in school called adding, and I got them all right, and I know how to. I said, adding? I can't believe, you're 3. You can't learn to add when you're 3. And I went through this whole long thing about adding and how terrific it was, and she kept saying, Daddy, the gold star, excuse me, but I was the only one in the class that got a gold star. I got them all right. I said, you know, Tracy, I said, honey, I said, some people just need to have gold stars, and teachers sort of like to give it out and make that the reason why you're doing something. I said, and set you apart from everybody else. I said, but your dad doesn't really care much about that and how you stack up with others, and they're going to be, I'm more interested in what you're learning. And she said, okay, she was used to that. She had a weird daddy, and she knew that. So about another month or so, she came home with a paper that had looked like it had a gold star on it, but it had obviously been taken off. Her little thumbprints were all over, but there was a place that had been a gold star. It was taken off. And I said, what's this? Oh, she said, we're now doing subtraction. And I said, subtraction? That's amazing. And I took over by her dresser. I said, you know that money you got in your piggy bank? I put it in my pocket. I said, that's called subtraction. Isn't that great? And she said, give me that money back. And we talked about subtraction. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I said, honey, what happened? What was this? What was here at the paper? And she said, that. She said, the teacher gave me one of those gold stars. I said, really? I said, well, what happened to it? Oh, she said, I took it off. I said, well, what'd you do with it? She said, I gave it back to her. I said, well, what did you tell her? She said, oh, I told her to give it to someone who needs that sort of thing. True story. What we have to do is learn how to take this ego of ours, this part of us that believes that who we are is what we have,
and what we do and what other people think of us. But remember, if you grow up believing that you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't. And if you believe that you are what you have, when it's gone, you aren't. And if you believe that you are what other people think of you, your reputation, which we raise people to believe, I have to be concerned with what other people think of me. Take this ego and retrain it.